I sat alone at a corner table, the low hum of the restaurant surrounding me like background music I couldn't quite hear. The glass of wine in front of me remained untouched, though I kept circling the stem with my fingers, pretending to be calm. The dress I'd chosen, sleek, black, subtle but deliberate, made me feel both exposed and powerful. In the window's reflection, I looked composed, maybe even daring. Each time the door opened, I lifted my eyes, half hoping, half dreading it would be him. The anticipation was electric, a dangerous mix of desire and nerves. I told myself I had reasons for being here, that I deserved this. Still, I knew once he walked in, I'd be stepping over a line I could never uncross. His name was Mark. We'd met months ago at a conference, nothing more than polite conversation at first, until the text started, then the late-night calls. It had all felt safe, secret, like a game I could still control. Up to now, I hadn't crossed the line in flesh, only in words, in thoughts and emotions I never admitted out loud. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't here for conversation. I was here because I had already decided how the night would end. The door opened again, and this time my breath caught, not from recognition, but from surprise. He wasn't Mark. He was taller than most of the men who had come and gone, well over 6 feet, with a lean build that carried itself like it belonged in command. His suit wasn't flashy but sharp, the kind you'd expect on someone who didn't just dress for style but for function, like a uniform made to blend in while hinting at authority. Then his eyes found mine, piercing green, startlingly close in shade to my own. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. Without hesitation, he crossed the room, the measured precision of his steps setting him apart from the casual diners around us. Before I could gather a word, he slid into the chair opposite me as though he'd been expected all along. His presence was unsettling, almost magnetic, and every nerve in me snapped to attention. He leaned back in the chair as if he owned the space, his gaze never leaving mine. "Catherine Whitman," he said smoothly, his voice low, deliberate. Then he reached inside his jacket, produced a slim leather wallet, and flipped it open just long enough for me to glimpse a badge and credentials. "My name is Timothy, Special Investigations Team." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. My first instinct was disbelief, my second a quick jolt of panic. He closed the wallet and slipped it away before I could study it closely, but the confidence in his manner made it impossible to doubt. His eyes, green and cutting, locked on mine like he could read every secret I had ever tried to hide. Timothy spoke, his tone firm but not unkind. "I know why you're here, Catherine. You're waiting for Mark Anderson. I know about the hotel tonight as well as your planned weekend getaway at the coastal resort." My stomach lurched, the name cutting through me like a blade. His expression didn't waver. Instead, he reached into a slim leather satchel at his side, drew out a tablet, and set it on the table between us. With a few swipes, he brought up a gallery of images and documents, bank statements, false IDs, surveillance shots. "Mark isn't who you think he is. He's been under investigation for fraud, money laundering, and identity theft for years. Several agencies are involved." The blood drained from my face as Timothy tapped the screen again, bringing up another set of photos. There was Mark, laughing in restaurants, wrapped around different women, each of them polished, professional, clearly more than casual flings. "He doesn't chase women for love, Catherine," Timothy said evenly. "He targets women with influence, contacts in banking, finance, and corporate sectors. Every dinner, every promise, every stolen moment is about extracting information, using intimacy as leverage. You weren't the only one, and you weren't chosen by chance. You were part of his scheme." I stared at the tablet, my throat dry, heat rising in my face. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Why are you even telling me this? I haven't done anything illegal. I haven't given him anything." My voice cracked on the last word, part defensive, part pleading. Timothy leaned in, his eyes narrowing but softening at the edges. "You're right. You haven't. Not yet." He let that hang in the air before lowering his voice. "I don't usually do this. My job isn't to warn people. But you remind me of someone I lost a long time ago in a similar situation. Who do I remind you of? I asked quietly, my voice barely above the murmur of the restaurant. He leaned back, eyes shadowed. My mother, he said finally. She had cheated on my father when I was young. The man she was seeing wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal. When the police moved in to serve a warrant, he opened fire on them. She was with him at the wrong time, in the wrong place. She got caught in the crossfire. He drew a slow breath, the muscle in his jaw ticking. I was 5 years old and I would sacrifice my entire life and future to be able to have her back. His words struck harder than I expected, my mind jumped instantly to my own son, Timmy. 5 years old. Still so little, still needing me for everything. I saw him in my mind's eye, curled up in his pajamas clutching his favorite stuffed animal, safe at home and trusting without question that his mother would always be there. I gripped the edge of the table, suddenly ashamed of the dress I had chosen, ashamed of the lies I'd told just to sit in this chair tonight. The thought of my son losing me, not to violence, maybe, but to scandal, to choices that could unravel everything he depended on, was unbearable. For the first time, the weight of what I was about to do came crashing down on me, and I felt sick. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his eyes. The guilt was a physical weight now, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. What now? I whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Timothy's expression softened, though the steel in his gaze remained. That's up to you, Catherine. I can't force you to do anything. But if you will allow me, I'd like to walk you to your car and send you home tonight. Look your husband in the eye and tell him everything. You still have a chance to pull this back, to reconcile, for your sake, but more importantly, for your son's. He deserves to grow up with both his parents. I can't tell him, it would destroy him, us. I exclaimed pleadingly. He is stronger than you think and knows more than you give him credit for. Timothy answered matter-of-factly. I couldn't find words, only managed a small, silent nod. Rising from the table, I followed Timothy through the maze of linen-covered tables, his steady presence both grounding and unnerving. The cool night air brushed my skin as we stepped outside, and for the first time all evening, the pounding in my chest began to slow. Halfway to the parking lot, Timothy held out his hand. Your phone, he said. Still rattled, I handed it over without question. To my surprise, he angled it toward us, leaned down until his chin rested lightly on my shoulder, and snapped a photo before I could react. I blinked at him, confused, pulling back slightly. Why would you do that? He slipped the phone back into my hand, his green eyes glinting under the streetlights. One word left his lips, calm and certain. Evidence. When we reached my car, I unlocked it and slid into the driver's seat. Timothy held out a manila folder. Copies of what I showed you, he said simply. Keep them. The weight of it felt heavier than paper should as I took it from his hand, resting it on the passenger seat. Our eyes met for one last moment, his steady, mine unsettled, before he stepped back. I started the engine, the rumble of it breaking the silence between us. As I pulled away, the folder sat there beside me, a silent reminder of the night I'd nearly traded my life for a lie. The ride home felt endless. By the time I turned into my neighborhood, the adrenaline that had carried me out of the restaurant had drained, leaving a heavy ache in my chest. The quiet cul-de-sac was dark, most houses already asleep. My own home sat at the end, a single lamp glowing faintly in the front window, the kind of warm, steady light that had always felt like safety. Pulling into the driveway, I shut off the engine and sat in silence, staring at the house that held my husband and son, their lives untouched, unknowing. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open the door, but gathering my courage I forced myself to go inside. The house was quiet when I slipped inside, the familiar creak of the front door louder than I expected. I eased off my heels, set down my purse, and turned, only to find Richard sitting at the kitchen table, a half-finished mug of coffee in front of him. He looked tired, but not surprised. You're early, he said softly, not accusing, just stating the fact. I thought you had a business dinner that was supposed to last several hours? My throat tightened. I wanted to lie, to find an excuse, but the folder in my hand and the memory of Timothy's eyes wouldn't let me. I crossed the room and sat down opposite him, my hands trembling as I laced them together. Richard. I need to tell you something. And it's going to hurt. He leaned back, silent, waiting. I've been talking to someone. A man named Mark. It started months ago, innocent at first, but it became more. Texts. Calls. I told myself it wasn't cheating because it wasn't physical, but, tonight I went to meet him. And this weekend, my voice cracked, and I forced myself to keep going. We planned a getaway. A hotel. I was going to cross the line. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. The silence felt unbearable, but I pushed through it, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't go through with it. I didn't sleep with him. But I can't stand here and pretend I wasn't ready to. I was. And I'm so sorry. I know, Catherine, he said. Some kind of special agent came by earlier. He told me everything. My heart lurched, a rush of confusion and dread crashing over me. What do you mean, everything? Richard's gaze was steady, unwavering. He told me about Mark Anderson. About the texts. The calls. About tonight, and what you were planning this weekend. He mentioned that he is wanted by the FBI and that you were involved somehow and that he was using you and that I should hear you out and, he paused. Forgive you. The breath I'd been holding slipped out in a shaky gasp. My confession suddenly felt smaller, weaker, like a shadow of the truth he'd already been handed. I'm sorry, I choked out between uneven breaths, my shoulders trembling. I'm so sorry, Richard. I don't even know how I let it get this far. I told myself it was harmless, that it wasn't real, but it was. I betrayed you, and I betrayed our son. I almost ruined everything. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I reached across the table, desperate to bridge the gap between us. Please believe me, I never touched him, I never gave him anything. But I wanted to. And that's bad enough. I hate myself for it. I don't deserve you, or the family we built, but I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose you. Richard didn't move right away. He sat there, watching me collapse into sobs, the silence stretching until it felt unbearable. Finally, he reached across the table, his hand closing gently but firmly over mine. Kathy, he said quietly, the edge in his voice softened by something steadier, resolve. You're right. You almost destroyed this family. You almost destroyed us. But you didn't. And I think that means something. I lifted my tear-streaked face, searching his eyes. I'm not going to pretend this is easy to hear. Or that I'll just forget it happened, he continued. But I also know what kind of woman you are. You've been a good wife, a good mother. You lost your way, but you stopped before you crossed the line. That matters. What matters more is what you do next. His hand tightened on mine. If you want this marriage, if you want to keep our family together, then we fight for it. Together. No more secrets. No more lies. You tell me everything, I'll tell you everything. We rebuild from the ground up, for us, and for our son. My chest shook with relief as his words sank in, the first fragile glimmer of hope breaking through the weight of my guilt. I wiped at my eyes with the back of my sleeve, nodding through the tears. There's something else, I whispered, reaching down beside the chair. I lifted the manila folder Timothy had pressed into my hands and slid it across the table toward Richard. He gave me this. Said it was evidence. Richard frowned but pulled it closer, flipping through the contents. The first pages were as expected, financial records, surveillance photos of Mark with other women, fake IDs. But then his hand froze on a sheet of paper, stark and jarring among the reports. It was a printed article, the header marked with the logo of an online news forum. The dateline stopped him cold, 3 days from now. The headline screamed, FBI raid at coastal resort leaves 2 dead, Mark Anderson and Catherine Whitman killed in gunfire exchange. My blood ran cold seeing my own name in print, bold and final. My breath came shallow as Richard read aloud the opening lines. An attempted arrest of fugitive Mark Anderson turned violent late Saturday night at a coastal resort. FBI agents confirm Anderson opened fire as they moved in with a warrant. Both Anderson and a companion, identified as Catherine Whitman, were fatally shot in the crossfire. The paper trembled slightly in Richard's hand. He looked up at her, eyes dark and searching. "Kathy, what the hell is this?" My voice shook as I pointed at the page. That's the resort. The one Mark and I planned to go to this weekend." The words tasted like ash, each syllable thick with guilt and dread. "That's where I was supposed to be." Richard's brows knit together, his eyes dropping back to the paper. He let out a hard breath, half a laugh without humor, and pushed the page aside. "Kathy, come on. This is dated 3 days from now. It hasn't happened. It can't have happened. This has to be some kind of scare tactic, something that this agent cooked up to rattle you." I shook my head, confused, almost desperate. "But why would he?" "I don't know," Richard cut in, his tone sharpening though not unkind. "Maybe to keep you away from Mark. Maybe to make sure you came home tonight. But a printed news story from the future?" He rubbed his temple with one hand, clearly unsettled despite his dismissal. "Neither of us can figure out how that makes sense. It's not plausible. It has to be some kind of manipulation." The folder sat between us like a live wire, daring either of us to touch it again. I swallowed hard, my stomach churning. I wanted to believe Richard, to accept the simple explanation, but the image of my name in bold print beneath the word killed refused to leave my mind. Later that night, we sat on the couch in silence. I leaned against Richard, exhausted, hollowed out from everything I had confessed. For the first time all evening, I felt my heartbeat slowing, the storm inside me calming if only a little. Richard slipped an arm around my shoulders, grounding me. The TV hummed in the background, some late-night news anchor's voice filling the quiet. I wasn't really paying attention, until the words cut through like a blade. "Breaking news tonight out of downtown. Fugitive Mark Anderson was killed in a shootout with FBI agents at a hotel just hours ago. Sources say agents attempted to serve a federal warrant when Anderson opened fire. Anderson was fatally shot in the exchange. No agents were injured." I sat bolt upright, my breath catching in my throat. Richard slowly turned his head toward the screen, his arm still around me but his entire body tense. On the screen, grainy footage of flashing red and blue lights outside a familiar-looking hotel filled the frame, the very place I had planned to meet Mark tonight. My hand flew to my mouth. "Oh my God," I whispered. Richard's jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't say it aloud, but I could feel the weight of the unspoken thought pressing down on both of us. Richard muted the television, the image of flashing lights frozen on the screen. He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, staring down at the carpet as though trying to make sense of a puzzle with missing pieces. "The folder said the resort this weekend. But now it's here. Tonight. Same guy, same shootout, different place." I hugged my knees, still trembling. Why the change? Why wasn't it the resort? Richard shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Maybe the folder was fake all along. Or maybe that agent wanted you to think you were being saved from some fate that was never going to happen." I stared at the frozen screen, my voice barely above a whisper. "Or maybe it changed because of him. Because he got involved." Richard looked at me, brow furrowing. I swallowed hard. Think about it. He knew where Mark would be tonight. He was already watching him. If he passed that to the FBI, they moved early. They caught him before this weekend. If Timothy hadn't stepped in, Mark would still be alive tonight, and my throat closed on the words, I might have still gone with him to the resort. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. Richard's jaw tightened as he considered her words, the weight of what-ifs pressing down. For the first time, I felt the enormity of Timothy's reach, not just in what he knew, but in how he had shifted the very path of my life. Eventually, the questions became too heavy to carry. Richard clicked off the TV, and the two of us turned in for the night. Sleep came in fractured pieces for me, shadows of what could have been mixing with the steady presence of my husband beside me. The next morning, the house felt lighter, the sun spilling through the kitchen window in soft golden beams. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, laughing as little Timmy clambered onto my back. He wrapped his tiny arms around my neck in a fierce 5-year-old hug, squealing with joy. Richard leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching us with a tired but genuine smile. "Hold still," he said, pulling out his phone. The shutter clicked, freezing the moment. When I glanced over at him, he tilted the screen so she could see. My smile faltered. The picture showed me with Timmy clinging to my back, his cheek pressed against mine, his little chin nestled on my shoulder, piercing green eyes staring at the camera. For a split second, my chest tightened, those eyes. My breath caught. "Richard," I whispered, staring at the photo, the resemblance gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. My hand shook as I dug my phone out of my purse and pulled up the photo Timothy had taken the night before. I held it up beside Richard's phone, forcing him to look. "Richard, look. Look at this." He leaned closer, his brow furrowing as the two images came into focus side by side. On my screen, Timothy with his chin resting lightly on my shoulder, his piercing green eyes staring directly into the lens. On his, little Timmy hugging me from behind, his cheek pressed against mine, his own green eyes shining in the same unmistakable way. The poses were identical, uncanny to the point of impossible. Richard's face tightened. When exactly did he take this?" he asked, gesturing to my phone. "Last night," I whispered. "On our way out of the restaurant." He said it was for evidence. Richard stared at the two screens for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he looked at me, almost pleading for her to say what he couldn't. "Catherine. Do you really believe this?" His voice cracked between doubt and fear. He lifted his phone again, then mine, then lowered them both with a shake of his head. "Are you saying you think that man, Timothy, is our son? Our fully grown-ass son? Do you realize how absurd that sounds?" he asked incredulously. My heart thudded hard in my chest, torn between logic and the impossible symmetry staring back at her. "I'm sorry, this is just too much." Richard rubbed his temples and muttered, "This is ridiculous," before pulling the manila folder back onto the table. He began rifling through it again, pages of bank records, surveillance stills, and reports spilling out in a loose stack. As he shifted the papers, something stiff slid free and fluttered onto the floor. He bent down, picked it up, and froze. It was a driver's license. Washington, D.C. and the name, Timothy Allen Whitman, the full name of their son. I noticed his expression and walked over concerned. "Something wrong?" Richard silently handed me the license. For a moment my breath caught, my eyes sliding down to the details. "Tell me what you see." The photo was unmistakable, the same piercing green eyes, the same chiseled jawline. I bent closer, my eyes drawn immediately to the text. "The birthday." My heart nearly stopped. "Richard, this is Timmy's birthday. Exact day, month, year." My finger trembled as I traced the numbers. Then I noticed the line below and felt my stomach drop. "And the expiration date, the year 2060. Richard's jaw flexed. "So it's not just me." The license blurred in front of me as tears welled up and spilled over before I could stop them. My chest ached, the sob breaking free in a jagged sound I hadn't made in years. Richard reached for me, but before he could, little arms wrapped tight around my waist. "Mommy?" Timmy's voice was small, frightened. He tilted his head up, his big green eyes searching mine. "Why are you crying? Did I do something bad?" That undid me completely. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into me, clutching him so tightly he squeaked. "Oh, baby, no, you're perfect. You're perfect." I kissed the top of his hair again and again, unable to stop. "You didn't do anything wrong. You saved me, Timmy. You saved my life." He blinked at me, confused but comforted, his little hands pressing against my cheeks as if to hold me together. And in that moment, staring into his eyes, I knew with a bone-deep certainty that somehow, someway, it was true. "How, Mommy?" Timmy asked innocently. "I don't know, baby, I don't know, but somehow you found a way." I sobbed into his ear. The rest of the day passed in a blur of ordinary things: laundry tumbling in the dryer, dinner dishes stacked to dry, Timmy racing toy cars across the rug. By evening, the storm inside me had dulled into a fragile calm. Richard and I sat side by side on the couch, the TV humming low, when suddenly he straightened. "Kathy, where's the envelope?" Richard asked, concern edging his voice. I frowned, my heart lurching. "It's on the counter, isn't it?" But when I checked, nothing. We searched the kitchen, the living room, under cushions, even the trash bin. It was simply gone. "Mommy." Timmy's voice tugged at me. I turned to find him standing at the front window, small hands pressed to the glass, his gaze fixed outside. Richard and I followed his eyes. My breath caught. There, across the street beneath the wash of a lone streetlight, stood Timothy. Tall, steady, the manila envelope tucked under his arm. He lifted one hand in a small, deliberate salute, his eyes catching mine even from that distance. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a faint smile. Then he turned, walking into the darkness until the light no longer touched him. And just like that, he was gone. Richard and I stood there for a long time, shoulder to shoulder, staring into the darkness beyond the streetlight. Neither of us spoke. The night was so still I could hear Timmy's small breaths against the glass as he pressed close, trying to see what we saw. A panicked thought stabbed at me. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter and rapidly scrolled through it. The picture, it was gone. The one taken as evidence, deleted as if it never existed. I raised it to show my husband, who grabbed it from me and scrolled himself as if somehow I just misplaced it. Disappeared, and with it every vestige of that future with it. Richard's jaw was tight, his silence heavy with questions he wasn't ready to voice. I could feel his doubt, his refusal to accept something that bent the world too far out of shape. But me? I didn't need more proof. I had seen enough, in Timothy's eyes, in the way he had carried himself, in the way he had saved me. I rested my palm on the glass where the light had last touched him and felt the cool night on the other side. The future was no longer a straight road rushing forward, it was something that could bend, break, and even heal. Choices mattered. Love mattered. A single step in one direction or another could mean life or death, despair or hope. And tonight, because of him, I had chosen differently. Whatever the years ahead held, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the future could change.